Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's edition of Anchor Watch with Bobby Jones. I am your humbled host, Bobby Jones, and a lot to talk about. Our guest today, um, one of the preeminent voices in economics in America, is going to talk about the economic policy or lack thereof of President Trump and this administration and how it affects you. And then at the end today, we're going to talk about the United States Constitution. Yet again, this is part of the American Civics series that we're doing, but we're going to focus on Article One. Article One, which the founders believed is the most important article in the entire Constitution. And after doing research into it and digging into it once again, I would have to agree. So, if you got something to eat or drink, please just chill out and just take this all in as we try to inform you on things that you need to know about. So, quick pivot. The chaos that we are dealing with in the economy. And what do I mean by chaos? The jobs report came out this past week, and President Trump did not like the numbers. So, what did he do? He fired the person responsible for gathering the numbers. Instead of addressing the fact that the possibility of this tariff accordion that we keep seeing from the White House could have negative ramifications on the American economy. He's basically saying the people who are keeping score, the people who are tracking trends, are not delivering accurate information. Well, we at Anchor Watch, we wanted to get someone on who knows exactly what the heck they're talking about. This is a professor who has written about the subject of international and domestic economics longer than I've basically, I think, been on the planet. And we wanted to get a subject matter expert to break down what are we watching as far as our economy and what the Trump administration believes they are doing. So, without further ado, we're going to play the interview I conducted here very recently with Dr. Charles Ballard, professor emeritus at Michigan State University. And he's a very prominent voice when it comes to economics. And so we'll take that from here and see you on the other side. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Anchor Watch. Again, I'm your host, Bobby Jones. And our guest today, this is a real treat. I talk about getting subject matter experts on the show. So you're not listening to pundits and opinions, but people who have spent a career or even a lifetime in the subject. We have with us Dr. Charles Ballard, professor emeritus at Michigan State University. The man has been doing this for longer than most of us who are watching have paid attention to this. And he has a very, very unique background. He's looked at things internationally, domestically. He understands what economic policy is, but most importantly, the reverberations of how it will affect you. So I just want to take the time. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Bobby. It's a real pleasure, and I think your introduction of me may have been more generous than it needed to be, but I'll take it.
No, 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 sir. As a matter of fact, let's get right into it.
Sure.
We are in the second Trump administration, which is drastically different than what we saw the first time around in 2017. One of the things that stuck out since he's come in is the economic policy. It's like he's the reincarnation of William McKinley with the whole tariff, 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 tariff. First of all, it doesn't
And
to
Herbert
me.
Hoover.
I was about that was my next my next
All right.
president was Hoover, and the reason I was going to say that is because there seems to be this idea that he has in his mind that tariffs is protectionism, but I don't understand. And many of us out here in regular world do not understand why he has this mindset. And can you just tell us what is he actually doing? Because we don't understand what the goal is, to be honest.
Well, I'm not sure whether the president himself always understands what the goal is, because there's been a tremendous amount of back and forth, making big threats, then pulling back, then just dozens of policy changes, which, of course, is exactly the opposite of what most businesses want, because they want a secure environment. They want to know what the rules are, and not that the rules are changing every week. But in terms of why we have this big change, very major change in tariffs policy, going back to levels of tariffs that we haven't had for almost a century.
Mhm.
President Trump has said for decades that he thinks that the rest of the world is ripping us off. And he sees the evidence that they're ripping us off as the fact that we have trade deficits with a lot of countries. That is, we buy more from them than they buy from us. That's a very, how do I say this? That's mostly not what's going on.
Right.
We have actually trade surpluses with a whole lot of countries. We have big trade surpluses with the Netherlands, Brazil, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, Argentina, Belgium, dozens of countries. But we do have bigger deficits with other countries, most notably China, Japan, Germany, Mexico. And so the sum of our deficits is bigger than the sum of our surpluses. So overall, we have a big trade deficit. But think about the logic. He says they're ripping us off. They're treating us very unfairly. Well, if that's true, if a deficit is evidence of unfair treatment, then we are ripping off the Brazilians. We are ripping off the Dutch. I don't think we are ripping them off. I think we've got stuff good products at a good price that they want to buy. And in terms of what we buy from other countries, same story. Most of the coffee, I'm a coffee drinker. That coffee wasn't grown in the United States. It was grown in Brazil and Uganda and who knows where else. So we bought something from overseas. All right. That's fine. The problem really is that we have this overall trade deficit, but that's not because other countries are ripping us off.
Right.
We have an overall trade deficit because as a country, and I think this is a bad thing, but as a country, we have been spending more than we make. And we've been doing that for the last 50 years. We consume more than we produce. We have more investment in the United States than we save to pay for. Well, that means that it's got to come from somewhere else. It's not going to come from Mars or Jupiter. So it's got to come from other countries on this planet. And so because we've had really a half-century debt-fueled consumption spending binge in the United States. And a big part of that consumption spending binge is our federal government budget deficit. The federal government spends way more than it takes in. And President Trump's policies, the huge tax cuts and the extension of existing tax cuts, those have exacerbated those deficits. So really, if you wanted to close the overall trade deficit, you'd have to do something about overall spending by the U.S. And that's not going to be fixed, or at least not very much, by tariffs.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So let me just try to summarize a little bit. Are you telling me some of the countries that he has blanketed gave double-digit tariffs to 10, 15, 20, 40%, we actually have a trade surplus with, because you mentioned Brazil.
Yes.
He jacked up the tariffs with them, the Netherlands.
Right.
Specifically, it seems like he should be going in with a scalpel and he has a meat cleaver across the board. The board.
I like the scalpel and the machete or meat cleaver analogy. It's like not just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but throwing out the sisters and the aunts and uncles and cousins with the bathwater. And so, I do make something of an exception for China. China presents a lot of real problems for the world economy. One problem with the Trump administration's approach to it, however, is it's very unilateral. It's Donald Trump wants to be at the center of attention for just about everything, and he wants to be in control. So he's very uncomfortable with multilateral alliances. I wish that we had gone down the route of the entire world reaching a trade agreement where we could restrain the Chinese, but trade pretty well with each other. But that's not the direction that we've gone.
So Wow. The interaction with China, and this is something that you kind of referred, to when it comes to businesses and stuff, and we'll get into this. Businesses, international businesses that are home, from the United States, they cannot plan long term with this type of environment. I mean, one day he's saying this about China, what he's going to do, the 140%, that ridiculousness. Then he walks it back. This accordion effect, especially like you said, dealing with China, now India, the largest producers in the world. If you're Ford, who's struggling because they import their parts, but they build stuff here, how do you plan for this beyond the fiscal quarter? How's that possible?
It's very difficult. You have to make, I guess, guesses about
Mm,
what the policy might be. And the policy has changed so many times that making those guesses is really hard. You just don't know. I've said more than once recently that even though I don't like particularly where we have landed with tariffs of 15% on a lot of
mhm,
countries where I wish it was much lower than that. Um, I wish we would just stop and give people a chance to take a breath.
mhm,
Okay. Because, yeah, I would prefer it to go back to 5 or 3 or whatever. Um, but 15, if that's the 20th different announcement in the last couple of months, why don't we just stop somewhere? In fact, I really think, I know Donald Trump is not going to take my advice on this, but on a whole bunch of things, I wish he would just stop talking.
mhm,
I think whenever he says ugly things about Chairman Powell of the Federal Reserve, that gives the jitters
mhm,
to the financial markets
mhm.
because the Fed's independence is really important. I wish he would just take a vacation and not say anything, but that's not really in Donald Trump's nature.
And we're going to get to Chairman Powell here in a second. Real quick before we do, though, I have seen many people, social media, news reports, and mainstream media, small businesses. These tariffs are choking the life out of a lot of small business because, Ford, as bad as it may seem for Ford, they can absorb this. But Main Street USA, that relies on parts being imported, cannot. So, how, in their mind, in the Trump administration mind, the Secretary of the Treasury, I mean, these guys are trying to sell, water to fish. How is it that they can justify the stress that small businesses, Main Street USA, is feeling as they're going out of business and saying this is still good for the economy? I don't understand that. I'm not an econ major, but can you please explain to me the thought process?
Well, since it's a thought process that I don't really agree with, I'm not sure I can do a good job of explaining it. But I think the idea is that if you put up barriers to to imports from other countries,
Mhm,
that will provide uh, room for American businesses to do those things instead. Uh, there, there are real limits. For one thing, you can't just let's say that you want to move a factory. There's a factory in China and you want to move
mhm,
it to the United States. You
mhm.
can't just put it on a ship and it's now in
Right.
Oregon in a month. These things take time, and so this is a jolting shock to the U.S. economy and the world economy. You may get some more businesses that under that protection. I mean,
Mhm.
after all, if you eliminated all imports, anything that we buy at the store would have to be produced domestically.
Right.
That's not a good idea. Let me go back to the example of coffee. I was talking to another
Mhm.
guy the other day, and he said, "Well, why don't we grow coffee here?" And I said, "Because climate and soil is not right." He says, "Well,
Right.
it's really warm down in Florida. Why not grow coffee in Florida or in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas?" Well, in South Texas, they're growing grapefruit. So
Mhm.
if you want to grow coffee, you got to cut down the grapefruit trees. I mean, there
Mhm.
is a cost. Often, I think these changes that President Trump and others envision about the effects of tariffs, I think they have this idea that you can snap your fingers and all these transformations will happen.
Mm.
That
Mm,
that's way, way, way overly optimistic. And so
mm,
I think real damage will be done. We'll see. It remains to be
mhm.
seen how bad the damage will be,
Right,
because of course many times President Trump has backed off.
right,
If he were to back off and then stay backed off,
right.
that would be a good outcome in my view. But
It almost seems like whoever has his ear last has like this lasting effect on him. He'll back off and stay back, and then someone else convinces him. And that, in my humble opinion, the only constant for businesses has been instability,
right,
which is the one thing that you want as a business. Um,
right,
let's turn domestically. You mentioned the Chairman Powell, head of the Fed. As long as I've been following this as an adult, I've never seen a president of the United States doggedly go after the chair of the Fed like this.
right.
Why is he doing it, and what do you think the ramifications could be?
Well, presidents, generally would like the Fed chairman to do whatever, to do some things that's more in line with what they would want. But I
Hmm.
think you're absolutely right that nobody has, I mean, calling the chair of the Fed a moron and
Yes.
all sorts of other insulting words, that's unprecedented.
Hmm.
I think that President Trump would like lower interest rates, and we have had the Fed be very cautious about
Hmm.
dropping down those interest rates. I actually think that the Fed has done a pretty darn good job in the
Hmm.
last 4 years. We through a whole bunch of things that included COVID supply chain snarls, we got inflation.
Hmm.
Then that forced the Fed to take action because their job is to move towards stable prices. Their
Hmm.
their goal is 2% inflation. Well, we were up to 9 3 years ago.
Right.
We're now down below 3, but it's been very stubborn. It hasn't gone all the way down to 2. And they've been cautious because, of course, the tariffs put upward pressure on prices. That's an
Mm.
inflationary thing.
Can doctor, can you real quick explain for our viewers what happens? Let's say they did what Trump wanted and lowered interest rates in this environment. What's the fallout of that?
Well, it may reignite inflation if they
Hmm.
if they go far enough. If they cut interest rates far enough, that would make borrowing and lending easier, and that would give the green light to a bunch of projects that are currently have the amber light, and
Hmm.
that would that has the potential to reignite inflation. That's why they have been so hesitant to do that. Now, the jobs report that came out last Friday was
Oh
that
boy.
indicates to me that the economy has been slowing down, and
Hmm.
probably the tariffs are part of that.
Hmm.
And I think that the Fed will, at its September meeting, they will bring down interest rates because they don't want to kick the economy into recession.
Mm.
The tariffs may kick the economy into recession all by themselves, but the Fed
Right.
doesn't want to exacerbate that. But you see what a delicate balancing act it is for the Fed
Mm.
because they don't want a recession, but they don't want inflation. And so they have to try to walk a tightrope. Um, One problem, though, if they do cut interest rates in September, what will happen? President
Mm.
Trump will say, I bullied them into submission. They
Exactly.
finally did what I told them to do, and that's really dangerous.
Hmm.
The independence of the Fed is, I think, incredibly important, and I wish the president would back off.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the jobs report from last Friday. So the fallout of that, and this goes more to his thumb being on the scale of the economy. He fires the person responsible for collecting that data. And this is after even revisions to make sure it was more accurate. What are we
Yeah.
doing? Can you
Uh,
explain to the fallout of this?
oh,
Because I've never seen this.
This is one of the most juvenile, one of the most childish actions that I've seen by any elected official in a long time. It's classic shoot the messenger. Look, the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is just a professional, right? There's no look. Little truth in advertising. Many years ago, between college and grad school, I worked in one of the government statistical agencies. I worked
Mm,
in the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is part of the Commerce Department.
mm,
And I know personally people who have worked in BLS and BEA and the Census Bureau and the Fed. They are patriotic Americans. They're trying to do the right job. They're not trying to put a Democratic spin or a Republican spin. They're trying to get the numbers as correct as they can, and
mhm.
doing it in a difficult environment because, of course, the BLS has had staff cuts, which makes it more difficult for them to do their job. But they're doing the best they can. Any in any implication by President Trump that they're politically motivated, that's just plain wrong, and it's insulting. And I take it kind of personally because I'm one of those data geeks, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and so um, and so, what's the possible fallout of that? The economy runs best if we think that if everybody, businesses, consumers, believes that we can trust the data, that the
Right.
data mean that the data have not been manipulated. President Trump is saying that the data are manipulated. No, he's the one who wants the data to be manipulated. This is very much like, and of course, just a couple of months ago, he was praising the BLS because he liked the
Right.
numbers. They were
Right.
doing a great job, and now it's all rigged. Very much like his uh, approach to elections.
Yes.
If he wins the election, everything's fine. If he loses the election, it's the result of some vast conspiracy. And I don't agree with that.
Moving forward with BLS having their head fired, how can we trust the data that's coming forth in the next reports? Like,
It, yeah, it makes you wonder
yeah.
if the
Mhm,
August job report, which comes out on the first Friday in September, if that
mhm.
job report is also all of a sudden, oh look, we added 500,000 jobs. I think most people would say, I have no idea what that means. I know it's wrong,
Mhm,
but I don't know what the true number is.
mhm, mhm.
And that, if we get to the point where you can't trust the numbers, I mean, the numbers are imperfect, let's face it, but they're the best that we can do. And
Right.
if instead of the best that we can do, what we have is numbers that are just designed to make the president feel good in the morning, that is not good for our economy in the long run.
Right. And so let's talk about that piece, the long run. Everybody and their mama has an opinion about what these policies are going to do right now and then 2 years from now, what we're looking at. Interesting enough, the big beautiful bill that got passed in Congress, that most of that takes place after the midterm elections, by design, but a lot of things in there, specifically the spending, and you're talking about the deficit and all this, it will make things skyrocket as far as that. And then you add the tariff policies or lack thereof that we're seeing economically long term, the next 2 to 3 years. Where will these policies get us? If you looked into your crystal ball, what would you think?
Well, one place that they'll definitely get us, and this is a continuation of the kind of policies that have been popular with people on the right side of the
Mhm,
political spectrum for a long time, we'll have a more unequal distribution of income in America. We've had that we are definitely getting. I mean, in
mhm,
fact, that's a huge story. Maybe we can talk about that some other time.
mhm.
Um, I think it's the biggest story in my lifetime. The huge increase in income inequality, with the top 1% doing fabulously well, and
Yep.
the next 5% doing pretty well, and a lot of ordinary Americans doing so-so. And what we have is huge tax cuts for the very affluent and
Mhm,
a tax increase for ordinary citizens in the form of tariffs. So that's one thing that's definitely happening. Then another thing that's happening is all this debt. I don't know how big the world credit market's appetite for dollars is, but I don't believe it's infinite. And we are pumping out debt like crazy. And I fear, although it's hard to predict when it will happen, I fear that there may come a time when the lenders around the world will say, hey, we don't really think this is a good investment anymore. Then what would happen? Then interest rates would rise, not because of any Fed policy, but because of the way the markets are working. Next year, we will pay more than $1 trillion of interest on our national debt. And that's going up really fast. So that's a long term. And then the other long term thing, we've talked mostly about the next few months and the next year, but over the long term, and this is very hard to quantify, but for 80 years, the United States has been the leader of setting up a rules-based system of international economic and security organization. And the Trump administration is abandoning that to a very large extent. We have had a trade regime that's been painstakingly negotiated during the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson administrations, and now it's kind of thrown away. And also, the various things that President Trump has said about NATO and all. The rest of the world used to view the United States as a reliable partner.
Right.
And I fear that an awful lot of, and it's not because they're America haters, it's just because they're realists, and they look at this and they say, how can we depend on these folks? And that would be, I think, maybe the greatest long-term cost of all of this stuff.
Wow. Dr. Ballard, I appreciate the realistic assessment of where we are. I when you hear all these different people, and when especially pundits, where they have their talking points that they print out and they repeat it, in my mind, again, it's not an economics major, I was poli-sci, the math is not mathing. It's not working. And you mentioned, the liberal international order that was established post-World War II that took decades of reliability to build, with the emergence of BRICS and all these other alliances. I just don't know how much longer people are going to be patient with us before they do not look at us as the economic trade partner of preference.
It's already happening. It's already happening. The Europeans are looking, okay, how can we solidify our trade relationships with South America, because we're not sure what's going to happen in North America. And there's a lot of that already going on. And I think that's unfortunate, very unfortunate.
Well, Dr. Ballard, I can't thank you enough for your time, your expertise, but most importantly, your due diligence in monitoring this. I mean, it's got to be maddening to a degree. But the good thing about academia is y'all are paid to think, and a lot of that's not happening right now. And I definitely would love to have you back on to talk more about that income inequality and that gap growing, because I've heard that too, and I'd love to dig into that if you have time in the future.
That would be great. I really have appreciated the opportunity to come on your program this time, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. That is Dr. Ballard, Professor Emeritus at the Michigan State University. Go Spartans. And we would love to have you back, and can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
So you heard it there from an actual subject matter expert on the economy. There are things that we as Americans need to be concerned about with this economic policy. And despite what you hear from the administration, the people whose job it is to collect facts and analyze the data are concerned. It's that simple. It's that simple. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm Bobby Jones for Anchor Watch, and stay anchored and stay sharp.